Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Modern Problems Require Modern Solutions. I'm Teresa Resick, Director in the Market Intelligence Group here at AIIM, and AIIM is your host and producer of today's event. And with me today are Alan Weintraub, and from Nexio we have Frank Rocha. And Nexio is the underwriter of today's webinar, and we thank them for their support, and thank you for taking the time to join us today. And before we get started, just want to offer a few pointers for viewing today's webinar. By joining our webinars live, you can customize your own viewing experience, so feel free to open, close, or resize the different windows. Across the bottom of your screen is a list of all of the widgets that we have available to you today. Group Chat is one of those widgets available to you, and just open it by clicking on that icon that says Group Chat. That is along the bottom of your screen, and you'll be able to text chat with each other and also with a few of us from AIIM. Do ask questions to the speakers throughout the hour using the Q&A feature. We will hold them until the end, where we should have about 5 or 10 minutes to answer them. But you can also use this feature to ask for any technical assistance. You may download a PDF of the presentation at any time. Just look to the resources list. And there's also a few other documents and links in there to help you learn more about today's topic. Just click in there at any time, and that resource will open in a new browser tab. You can also save and read that after the webinar. And at the end of the webinar, a brief survey will open in your browser, and it's also in the widgets along the bottom of the slide area. And I would greatly appreciate it if you'd take a few moments to offer your feedback and to suggest other topics for us to cover. This webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted to AIIM.org's Resources Webinars page in just a few days. Now I'd like to introduce the two speakers that we have with us today. Alan Weintraub is a senior information management leader focusing on helping organizations maximize the value of their information. He is a leading expert on multiple aspects of enterprise content management, including governance, document management, imaging, digital rights management, and digital asset management. Alan helps organizations define their strategies, identifying organizational risks associated with ECM implementations, and build governance programs that ensure information integrity and project success. And Frank Rocha brings a unique 360-degree perspective to content services. His experience ranges from consulting to Fortune 500 companies on content strategies for large-scale, multi-year ECM solution deployments, to consulting in the financial services industry, helping startups and established ECM providers identify correlations between industry growth vectors, market disruption, and the solutions needed to address industry pain points. And today, Frank brings his expertise to Nexio as their Director of Marketing for Financial Services. So briefly, just want to cover the agenda, what Alan and Frank are going to be talking with us about today. And we're going to start off hearing from Alan about how content challenges are differing from those in the past. And we'll also discuss what are the business implications of big content, and then just taking action and more to the heart of how modern problems require a modern solution. And we're going to hear actual strategies for how to take action. So right now, I'm going to turn things over to Alan Weintraub to begin his part of the talk today. Alan?
Thanks, Teresa. Welcome, everybody, to our webinar. I'm going to go through some areas coming back from some survey results that AIIM put out last year, and give you some kind of connection points to how that information really connects to you as an organization. The first thing we're going to talk about is, why are the content challenges different from those in the past? What are we facing today, and why is content becoming so much more pervasive, but also much more important to our organization's operations? We looked at first the explosion of content and how are organizations using content today. Where is it being used? If you think about in the past years, myself as an analyst looking at this industry over the last 20 years, we've seen organizations move from, okay, well, let's just manage our content in file systems, and let's just manage our content in ECM solutions, and does that work? Is it difficult? Users end up managing their content in email systems. Content becomes pervasive throughout the organization, and there's no single way that organizations manage that content. And when we looked at the survey results, what we found is basically that same kind of capability. what do we see? We see organizations managing content in in-house developed systems, unique systems that might be for applications for operational kind of capability, and they find that it's not just data that goes into these systems, but you also need to look at the content that's associated to the data, to look holistically at the broad spectrum of information to make those decisions. Same thing with line of business applications, HR applications, finance applications. More and more, those applications are not just pure data-driven applications anymore. They become data plus content. So good example. You're using Salesforce. You're doing a CRM application. You have all the contact information for your client, but now you want to also put in there information that might be pertinent to a purchase order or to a contract that might be associated to that client. So now you've got content associated with data. We also see a big movement to cloud-based applications. And things like Dropbox and Box have becoming more and more prevalent in the content management space. Organizations are saying, I want to manage my content the way I managed it on my desktop and file systems. Can I do that in the cloud? And they move to the cloud because they want to start sharing that information more broadly and making it easier to access by mobile devices or access content where I work. So we're finding more and more movement into that cloud-based organizations, cloud-based systems, where they're taking up not only the traditional ECM solutions moving to the cloud, but also the new file sync share applications that are adding content capability, content management capability to the applications to be having a broader focus and a broader capability for an organization. Then we say, though, that content is scattered everywhere, right? Now that we've talked about the fact that we've got more content coming from multiple places, it's much more important to our organization's benefits and operations. We now see the content is scattered all over the place. So content traditionally was in file systems. We saw content coming in things like SharePoint when they started to move out there, and you saw the SharePoint sprawl where content could have been put in many different places and many different sites in SharePoint. In-house developed systems, collaboration systems, we see it. Line of business systems, content is associated with. We just talked a little bit about the cloud file shares and Google's Drive and Dropbox and Box. Traditional document and content management systems, which are still pretty prevalent. But the interesting thing is, look at the last 2 points, which I said in the previous slide. Email and file systems are still the most prevalent places for content. We struggle in an organization when we're trying to put content management strategies in place to look at where all of our content exists. And when we look at it and we start to dissect it, and we find that content is in all these different places, we struggle with how do we put strategies together? How do we come together as an organization and not just dictate what people should put content, but put a holistic strategy that allows people to work where they need to work, how they need to work, and not over-regulate them in putting strict content management solutions together, but still make it prevalent, make it usable to the organization. And this slide, and this survey result really shows you how many different places you can find content in an organization and how difficult that strategy becomes as you start to take in all these different areas. We look at the emergence of big content now. Okay, so now we had this notion that there was this emergence of big data. Big data was, in the past, was this conglomerations of terabytes and petabytes of information, of data, used to make decisions that come into a pool area. Well, now we're seeing this notion of big content also coming into play. And big content really says, I have increasingly numbers of content assets, so I no longer can run my business by a pure data collection, a data world by itself, but now I need to be able to run my business looking holistically at all of the information available to me. And more I realize that that information that's becoming available to me is really becoming available to me as content assets. So if you look at the slide here, you see that the number of content assets is increasing. What kind of assets are they? We're seeing things that are coming into the organization, not just traditional content like documents or even spreadsheets or PowerPoint slides, but more new media kinds of assets, rich media, video, audio. And then we're now seeing the content is coming into the organizations in more of the social media aspects. So we need to take into account things like blog posts and LinkedIn information, or even Twitter. The biggest example of how Twitter and Twitter content comes into an organizational realm is, let's look at the way our government's being run today. Our president uses Twitter as his major communications channel. So we've now gone from a communications channel that may have been press releases or updates, news articles in other cases, to being Twitter. And that Twitter account, that Twitter feed, that content comes out of there is a record and needs to be managed and needs to be captured. And more organizations have understood that the social media communications aspects of the organizations is also an important aspect of content that needs to be managed and utilized in making key decisions. So what are the business implications of big content? Let's take a few minutes and look at some of the survey results of how big content is affecting our organizations and how do we deal with that. So let's look at the first problem. Problem one, it's increasingly difficult to find what you need. So the interesting premise that we've operated under as an enterprise content management analyst and researchers and consultants is we always talk to our clients to say, we want to give you the right information at the right time in the right place. Well, this increasing amount of content that we're seeing coming into the organization makes that much more difficult. We have content that is coming in all forms. We've got content coming in mobile. We've got content coming in via email. We've got content that may be scanned and images that may be captured. We have content that's being created. So we have all of this information. Can we effectively put it into some sort of virtual kind of world where that information is accessible to us? If you see that, the problem in the organizations here is, absolutely, is we've got compliance information. When a regulator goes to your organization, whether that be a pharmaceutical organization that's regulated by the FDA or a financial organization that's regulated by the Federal Reserve or the SEC, or that's an individual corporation that's being regulated by things like Sarbanes-Oxley, when somebody comes, and now we've got GDPR in Europe, somebody says, I need to find this information. The faster you can deliver that information, the better it is to your organization to be meeting their compliance needs. Organizations that have a difficult time finding that information tends to give the regulator an opportunity to ask more questions and tend to make the audit much more difficult. Now with GDPR coming about, if you're not familiar with it very quickly, it's about what do you know about me? What information you have about me, and I can opt out, and I can tell you to delete your information about me so that you no longer can maintain it. Well, if information about an individual that you're working with, personal information, is contained in multiple repositories and multiple documents and multiple content sources, finding, managing, and regulating that information can be a very difficult aspect. Cost of legacy applications, obviously, is always a difficult thing. But ultimately, look at the last 2 points on this slide. Information overload and finding the right information are the two top areas that people are concerned about in problems for their organizations around content. Again, going down to the last one, finding the right information, that goes back to the premise, the right information at the right time. How do I find the right information so I can make the best decisions? Organizations spend a lot of time finding information. There's many surveys out there. There's many different articles that have been published, and it's anywhere from 15% of your time or 8 hours a week spending on your time, but people spend a considerable amount of time trying to find the right information to make the right decision. And that's only complicated by that information overload because we have information coming from us from all different aspects, and they can be contradictory at times. So you have to make sure that you're getting the right information and you're validating that information before you make the decision. Usability is a problem for most organizations. Interesting enough, I have said in the past, in a lot of my research in the past, a lot of my work in the past, I have been adamant in telling organizations that I actually feel that enterprise content management solutions, document management, managing of content in a formalized, strict manner is highly disruptive to organizations and can actually be the most disruptive to an organization. And what I mean by that is that you're telling somebody to work in a particular manner that they may not want to work in. They're used to putting their documents in their file systems. They're used to managing documents in email, maybe in SharePoint, but you're telling them to manage something in a manner that they're not used to. And when you do that, that causes usability problems to the organization and adoption problems to the organization. So when you think about all of the content coming from all these different sources that may be managed, may not be managed, how do you use the information? How do you access it? How do you find it? Is there indexes? Is there metadata around it? Is there some kind of organizational structure to it? What's the UI, the user interface that I'm using to get to it? Do I like that? Is it easy to use? So that this whole notion of usability for the average worker becomes foremost up front in making sure that you create an environment that people can find and use that information easily. The next point, mobile access, is really the last place on that, the right information, the right time, and the right place. I want to work where I want to work, when I want to work, and how I want to work. And the users that have come into the marketplace over the last probably 15 years want to work where they want to work, when they want to work. And that is not always in the office in front of a desktop computer. That's not always with a laptop. With the advent of the iPads, with the advent of mobile computing, of a phone, I want to work on the phone. I want to be able to do reviews of content on my phone. I want to be able to do approvals of information on my phone. I need to answer a question very quickly. I'll give you a good example of a mobile access and a mobile use of content. Just the Federal Reserve, for a bank examiner, when they're going out to a bank, they want access to all that bank information maybe from the previous exam, so that they can now look at that information when they're going in and opening up an exam. So they're up to speed, they're intelligent about the previous exam, and they know the issues that they may want to relook at as they go into this new exam. It's knowing the information and having the right information when you need it. The last piece is around sharing information. Interesting is we have sources of information in enterprise organizations that may be in stovepipes. And more organizations are trying to break down their stovepipes and be able to share that information across the organization. A good example, I did some work with a pharmaceutical company, and they had multiple disciplines across the world in an enterprise format. But they wanted to share information, research information, and clinical information across these disciplines, these domains. And they needed to be able to create an environment, their content environment, with a taxonomy, with a metadata model, with an indexing model that allowed them to search across the domains for common information so that they may find that a drug didn't work in one domain, maybe it didn't work in ontology, but it could work in another domain. And they could then cross-use a drug that may not have been successful one place, but could be successful in another area. So we're finding more and more opportunities that way of using information across the domains within your organization, but organizations are having difficulty sharing that information because it's not unified. It comes in different ways, and it's not described in a manner that induces sharing. Finally, this ability to integrate information across the systems is an important aspect. How do we make sure that the content can be integrated into lines of business applications? Content itself may not be valuable, but content in context with other applications may add increasing value to it. So it's getting that integration between the content management system and the core business systems. Most content management systems, sure, they manage content, you check it in, you add some metadata value to it, we can search for it, we might put it under records management capability, and it could be a self-contained system. But the real value of that content really doesn't get exposed or opened up until you've integrated it with a line of business application, a contract management solution, a financial solution, an HR solution, other types of line of business applications opens up the value of that content. And then the last piece is that ability to interconnect the different systems. We have multiple content management solutions, and the most difficult problem that any organization has is this proliferation of different content management systems, whether it's I've got SharePoint and I've got OpenText and I've got Box and I've got FileNet. How do I integrate them together? What's my tying point together? How do I make sure that information from one system doesn't have to be duplicated into another one just because I need to use it in the other system? How do I create interoperability between systems so that I can, as a user, have a single virtual interface into all of my content information so that I can quickly access, retrieve, interpret, and then ultimately make the best decision with that information. So when you look at this, to summarize it real quickly is we've got this explosion of content in our organizations coming from multiple sources, multiple places. The traditional manner of managing that content that we thought we could do in the 2000s, where we were building out the ECM world, is really not working for us anymore. And we need to come up with ways, maybe through technology, but maybe through process, where we can integrate these solutions together, whether it's real or virtually, so that we can use that content in a better manner. To start to talk about how that content can be used and how we do that, I'm going to turn the slides over to Frank for him to continue with the presentation.
Excellent. Thank you, Alan. So Alan has just done a great job in describing the challenges that organizations are having identifying and leveraging critical business information in their day-to-day business operations. But what is it that is really driving the need more than ever to access content buried in information landfills across our organizations? And the answer is it's customer focus. Organizations are being pushed to evolve from transactional-oriented business models by organizations that excel at delivering an information-rich customer experience. So by now, you've probably all heard somebody say, why isn't it as easy to do business with and plug your company name in there as it is to do business with Amazon? What's clear is that customer experience has taken center stage, and this disruption and the subsequent customer expectations have really permeated across all vertical industries. Within financial services, the CEO of Hamilton Insurance Group recently stated that disruption in other industries has created an expectation of what the customer experience should be like in the 21st century. And Walker, who is a CX consulting firm, has stated that customer experience will overtake price and product as the key brand differentiator by 2020. So how are organizations to compete and remain relevant in this evolving ecosystem that's being placed out there by big tech and fintech and insurtech and plug tech after whatever name you want to put in there? If you're going to compete on customer service, and you have no choice these days, you must deliver information-rich products and services that are easy to use, that deliver relevant information quickly, and is available whenever the customer wants it. That information must be delivered in a highly personalized manner, connected across all devices, with a holistic 360-degree view of the customer, and maintain a consistent, seamless look and feel. Now, that's quite a challenge to try to take on, and so let's try to kind of dissect it a little bit in the time that we have available to try to come up with some potential ways of addressing the problem here. Now, like I said, it's no easy task when, as Alan already pointed out, some of the major inhibitors to success are it takes too long to deliver a solution. The volume, types, and sources of content are exploding. And despite decades of promises from the ECM industry about a unified content repository, we still have content scattered all across our organizations. So first, a modern solution has to be agile enough to deal with the explosion of content. And it has to be scalable, and it has to be able to be deployed fast, and it has to be mobile ready. Second, today's solutions have to be connected to everything by design, not by default. Accessing content locked away in information landfills and the difficulty in integrating that content into business applications remain two of the major challenges that are being experienced by organizations. And number three, the business has to have control over their processes by allowing quick customizations and the ability to deliver self-service applications. Today, organizations are plagued with static, monolithic applications that make it difficult to create personalized solutions and simply have not kept up with the evolving business needs. Platform-based content solutions delivering microservice-based capabilities is really how organizations are going to evolve and deliver future-ready applications at the speed of today's digital business. Mark Anderson, who, if you're familiar with him, he's really a pioneer in technology. Today he sits on the board of companies like Facebook and eBay and HP, just to name a few, has stated that a platform is a system that can be adapted to countless needs and niches that the platform's original developers could not possibly have contemplated. So it is the flexibility of a platform-based solution that holds the promise for application modernization going forward. If you take a look and you contrast today's legacy applications with platform-based solutions, the benefits dictate that this is really the path towards application modernization. So with a platform, you have a component architecture rather than everything kind of locked into one big monolithic solution. A platform delivers individual services rather than all of the functionality being lumped together into that single application. So what that means is that the development and the support of these services can be distributed across the enterprise rather than having to be funneled through a single dedicated organization. And because each service stands on its own merit, only the service that has been touched or modified has to be tested rather than in today's environment having to regression test, essentially the entire stack. So what this means is that, excuse me, I jumped a little quick there. So what this means is that the functionality can be delivered incrementally and quickly as opposed to having to wait for major release cycles. And then since the platform is a component architecture, preferably built natively for the cloud, not something that was simply ported to the cloud, individual components of that architecture can be scaled versus having to scale the entire solution. And finally, because you now have this kind of fabric of services, you can quickly stitch together highly personalized products and services for your customers. So here's the bottom line, and that is you have to understand that today, you are really an industry among industries. What I mean by that is that your customers, do not have different expectations for different industries. If they receive a superior customer experience in one industry, they're going to expect that same level of service across all industries. So if you intend to grow your organization, as most do through customer retention, through wallet share, and through market share, my recommendation to you and our recommendation from Nuxio is this. You must modernize your applications through a platform approach in order to provide the speed and digital agility necessary to deliver future-ready business applications that deliver the customer experience you need to thrive in today's digital economy. Now that's a lot to digest in a very short amount of time, We'd love to talk to you about it offline. If you'll simply reach out to us at nuxio.com, or you'll see my personal information here shortly. But at this point, I'll turn it back over to Teresa to conclude the webinar for today.
Well, thank you. And just wanted to have a couple of thoughts up here for 1 second. I have some Frank's contact information just for you to reach out to him, and also there is the link in the resources area to reach out to Nuxio as well. And we do have some questions that have come in here, and let me just pop over that one right here. And Alan, just wanted to direct a first question over to you. When you were speaking, you had referenced GDPR, and someone asked, what does that acronym stand for? And that is the General Data Protection Regulation. Can you give a super quick synopsis of what that is and the context for why you brought that up?
Yeah, so that is a European regulation around data privacy. And what the regulation basically states is anybody doing business with a European constituent who manages or includes and manages the personal information of that European constituent, and that personal information is anything around not just Social Security number or identification number, but it's also address and phone number. I think even email falls into that realm. That is considered personal information.
IP addresses a lot.
What's that?
The IP addresses, emails, definitely, yes, all of that falls in.
Emails, anything that's personal. And it's a very inclusive regulation. And what it basically says is if you are holding my information, I can ask for what you're holding about me. I can opt out. It's an active option, so I can opt out of you holding that information, so you no longer hold it. I can tell you not to hold it, and I can also then say to you, I want you to delete my information because I don't want anybody else having my personal information, especially you or your organization. So if you notice, and there's a lot more around it, but it's really around that. What do you know about me? Do I want you to know that about me? And should I tell you to delete that information about me? So you'll notice over the last couple of weeks, it went into effect May 25th. And if you'll notice over the last couple of weeks, everybody has been issuing all Facebook and LinkedIn and I've got a Groupon. Every account I work in has been issuing new privacy statements around personal data to conform with GDPR. So it goes. So if you're only doing U.S.-based information and you're only managing personal information or dealing with individuals in the U.S., GDPR doesn't pertain to you. But if you're dealing with any individual in Europe, GDPR does pertain to you. It doesn't matter what you're doing. As long as you're having interactions with that European person, you have GDPR regulations adhering to you. Okay, get back to you, Teresa.
Thank you for the great recap. It's one of those things that because like Alan, Frank, and I know in each of our businesses we're so concerned with how we work and adhere to GDPR. It's that assumption that everybody knows about this, and so it's always worth reminding because not everybody knows about this. So thank you, Frank. I do have a question here that someone has asked here, and I want to direct this next one over to you. Someone's asking, how does AI fit into the picture? Artificial intelligence. How does that? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so AI is an extremely important technology that's at play today across all information systems. It's the way organizations are doing, in a lot of cases, real-time decisioning. It is really geared around not only gathering intelligence, but really increasing the speed of business. So you see a lot of companies out there that, for example, these days can underwrite a mortgage loan within 48 hours, who can give you instantaneous credit. Those things or those types of activities are simply not scalable by throwing people at the problem. So artificial intelligence natural language processing, machine learning, all those types of technologies come heavily into play there. The problem is that, if you can't find information in order to apply those technologies to, they don't do you a lot of good. So what a lot of organizations are struggling with today before they can really leverage the full potential of those technologies is, we have to find our content, we have to get control over it, we have to know where everything is. And I think if you ask most institutions, they would concur that is probably the biggest inhibitor to fully deploying the full potential of AI capabilities within the organization. That is being able to find and know where their information is.
And Alan, your thoughts about AI and machine learning and how that's affecting this?
Yeah, so it's interesting. From an AI perspective, I've seen it a couple places. You see it in the analysis and the analytics area where people are using AI to farm or to search through information and extract value out of that information. So that they can recognize key activity. I don't want to say activities, but key phrases or pieces of information. So I could say I want to look for, through all of my content, I need to know everything that I'm doing with this particular organization for contracts. And the AI tool, understanding the fact that I'm looking at this organization and contracts might look for money, might look for terms, might look for dates, and they can extract all that information and give it back to me from an analytics perspective. But the other interesting aspect that people are starting to look at AI and machine learning is in the ingestion of content. So we talked about content coming from all different aspects, all different places, all different sources, being put into all different kinds of repositories. Well, how do you ingest that content, and how do you grab some uniformity, some information, metadata out of that content so that you can use it in the analytics and search capabilities? And people are using AI and machine learning to inspect the content, to then extract key elements out of it, to then use that as part of the tagging and the metadata value capabilities.
Well, it's making me think about how can standards, the application of standards, help with managing the content. Alan?
Yeah, so one of the key aspects that people, with this proliferation of all these content sources, that people really need to be thinking about is creating a good governance model. Governance is, my definition of governance is the roles, responsibilities, processes, and procedures that ensure information integrity. So by developing a good governance model, meaning that developing good policies and procedures, roles around managing content, you're able to set up standards and rules and capabilities so that content that's coming into your organization is managed in some consistent fashion, no matter where it is, but it has a consistency in the policies around it, and the procedures around it, and the security models around it, so that you're controlling that content uniformly across the organization, and now you're starting to have that better visibility into it using that governance model.
I want to ask a different question here, take the conversation a little differently. And Frank, let me go ahead and start this off with you. Someone's asking, how do you see microservices architecture replacing traditional legacy solutions?
Actually, I see that happening right now, and today it's a slow, incremental, iterative type of thing that's going on. I mean, very few companies are going to rip out their legacy applications and totally re-architect their core platforms based on microservices. What we're seeing is kind of a slow chipping away at selective capabilities within those core platforms. So, within insurance, you may see something where maybe the bind process is being segmented out, or the reissuance process is being put out, or, within banking as well, there's certain underwriting components in consumer lending and credit pieces and parts that can be pulled out, created as essentially best of breed, leveraged as these stateless microservices that can be leveraged and reused across the enterprise. And I think what we're seeing is over time, more and more of these pieces and parts are going to be removed. A lot of them are going to be replaced with fintech and insurtech and bank tech types of applications. Some of those things are going to be standard, like you want to integrate with PayPal or DocuSign. So you're going to begin to see slowly over time these big monolithic platforms being decomposed into these kind of really best of breed sets of services that ultimately result in this kind of fabric of capabilities that will allow you to quickly stitch together and actually, and we refer to the term future-proof or future-ready, because you have these kind of individual service components. They're easy to modify, they're easy to pull out and replace. And so I think over time, what you're going to see is that a lot of these big, standard, homegrown, or in some cases, COPS products are going to be decomposed into these set of services, and eventually you'll have business applications that are built entirely from, this kind of library of services that are maintained within the organization.
Thanks. Really helpful answer. I just wanted to mention a couple of things that we have going on in AIIM right now. One, a little bit about AIIM training. We offer live instructor-led training as well as online self-paced classes. And you can thoroughly immerse yourself with a deep dive course, or you can dip into a topic with our quick study offerings. We can even arrange for a trainer to come to your place of business and provide custom perspective to our instructor-led programs. So all of the information on that and a whole lot more can be found at aim.org/training. And there's even a new program we have in there on emerging technologies talking about artificial intelligence and a number of other topic areas. So a lot in here to consider, and I encourage you to check that out. And also just wanted to invite you to join us for a free 4-hour virtual event, all via your computer, and it's going to be on Thursday, June 21st. So just click on the link in the resources for the virtual event and to get to the webpage and to register. And we have a dozen different speakers lined up, and each are going to be talking about different aspects of how they're advancing their organizations with the various components related to intelligent information management. And I've been seeing these presentations rolling in, prepping for this event, and it's going to be a fantastic discussion. So I encourage you to join us. That's on Thursday the 21st, and it is free to attend. So I do invite you to check that out. And just because we are at the end of our webinar time today, just want to remind you that we have recorded this webinar, a lot of great information. So it will be available in the next day or two at AIM.org's resources webinars page. So come back, listen to it again, or invite a colleague. Don't forget to download those resources that we have available to you. Also, when the webinar is over, greatly appreciate it if you would take that survey, or you can click on the link that's at the bottom of your screen there for the survey. I value your feedback and your suggestions, so appreciate it if you would take a few moments to complete that. Thank you very much to our underwriter, Nexio. Without the support from our solution providers, AIM wouldn't be able to bring you these free educational programs like our webinars. So Nexio, thank you for your sponsorship. I do appreciate that. And as we do bring the webinar to a close, I just want to leave everyone with our speaker's closing thoughts or a key takeaway from today's discussion. And I'm going to begin first with analyst Alan Weintraub. Your closing thoughts today.
So my closing thoughts are really around, make sure you understand that content is exploding, coming from multiple sources, non-traditional sources that you would really look at with social media and other aspects, and understand that you need to consider that content in your overall information management strategy, holistically looking at how that content relates to applications and other data so you can make your best informed decisions.
Thanks, Alan. And Frank Rocha from Nexio, your closing thoughts today.
Sure. So I would close with this. As you are looking at your legacy applications and you're contemplating a modernization strategy, keep in mind that, the threat that is coming from non-traditional competition and the changes in expectations that are coming to you from organizations outside of your vertical industry that are forcing you to kind of adapt almost, I would say, almost to a retail model. And I'll leave you with this. I saw an interesting quote from Jeff Bezos a while back where he stated that all teams, referring to Amazon internally, all teams will expose their data. Teams must communicate through interfaces. No other form of inter-process communication will be allowed. Interfaces without exception must be externalizable. I'm not sure that's a word, but externalizable. And anyone who doesn't do this will be fired. That's kind of dramatic, but it does show the need to begin to have a significant amount of digital agility and an ability to deliver information-rich products and services at a speed with which the traditional legacy applications simply, just cannot adhere to today. So as you're looking at your modernization strategy, kind of look outside of your industry. I believe it's Jack Welch who said, when the rate of change outside exceeds the rate of change inside, the end is near. So look outside the walls and see where your competition is coming from. See who's dramatically changing your business models, and do your application modernization in a way that best facilitates your quick and agile movement around an evolving business dynamic.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you, everyone, for your time today. For AIIM, this is Teresa Resick, and we will see you with our next webinar. And have a good afternoon.
All right. Thank you.